A new system notification appeared in front of our hero, and a bright flash illuminated everything around him. He had to cover his face with his hand. A new contract was created that made the vampire elder his familiar. After that, a new system notification appeared, which surprised our hero with its information. But it wasn't just the new information, it was the new look the former vampire had gotten. She became a black cat. Truthfully, she herself didn't expect such an appearance. So she ran around in circles and purred loudly like a cat. Her transformation did not go unnoticed. He thought maybe she would become some kind of bat, but instead she became a cat, and her necklace around her neck now fit her as well as it had before. It was now a standard pet collar. But transcending her new transformation into a cat, she gathered all her strength. A bright flash of pink light illuminated everything around him. Now she was back to being the vampire she was before. She could not accept the new role to which she had been assigned, that she should become his familiar. How dare he make it so that he had her tied to him? She held her necklace around her neck with her hand as if trying to remove it. But this time it wasn't up to her to decide what to become. So no matter how she felt about this situation, and this situation was a humiliation to her, she was destined to be a cat in another world. And in this world she was destined to be a vampire. There was a new system notification that said the transformation ability could be temporarily disabled if it was mana-related. Gradually realizing that she had no other choice, she walked towards our hero with the gait of an ordinary cat, and said she didn't see how she could help him. But now she has no other choice, and she is completely at his disposal. Our hero picked her up in his arms and brought her close to him, but she wanted to scratch him with her claws and tried to dig into his neck. She didn't succeed, and he pulled her away from his body. Our hero calmed this ferocious beast down a bit. He spoke to her about whether she had really been betrayed by her former owners of this house. She may be wrong about that, but the cat didn't want to listen to him and started hissing loudly back, to which he replied, "Yes, I know you told me that earlier, but listen to me please again." Proudly raising its black tail, the cat began to listen to our hero. He began asking her conflicting questions related to her past fate. Did living the way she had really have any meaning? Our hero didn't know exactly what had happened to her, and kept asking questions and telling her about the fate of her former masters, who now lay dead weight on the floor in the form of big huge dolls. And he had a feeling that these dolls behaved in a certain way according to a special program laid down earlier for them. Our hero questioned whether they had real egos because you couldn't tell from their behavior. With undisguised irritation, the cat told him that it was normal for the humans to change accordingly to the needs of the body, and the fact that they were in such a state was completely due to the fact that they had previously used corrupted mana. So it is not surprising that their egos were atrophied. She asked him if he was trying to generate feelings of sympathy for the former idiots she had lived with for so long. He said no, not really. But all he wanted to convey to her was that if it was him or any other person in a normal state, they would never have chosen to live the way they did as huge dolls. It's completely unthinkable. And after saying that, he headed towards the huge doll that was lying on the floor, continuing to think about what he had just said. The cat stood still and watched his actions. At this time, our hero came very close to a monster of enormous size which was lying on the floor. It was a doll in the form of the master of the house. In his right hand, he held a large-sized orb that emitted a pleasant pink light. He held out his hand toward her and told her to come closer. Unable to act any other way, the cat leapt forward and immediately appeared beside him. But no sooner had the cat fully reached him in flight than he stopped next to this ball which he held out forward and explained that it was no simple crystal, and that this crystal is used in black magic to imprison a part of the soul and mana of the person who uses it. Our hero continued. He told her that apparently they didn't have enough technical ability to fully realize what they had envisioned. So they had to take and put all their energies into these dolls, and they transferred their souls into these new monsters. The cat growled and couldn't believe what he was saying. Is he really trying to tell her that everything they've done is just to save her? And we returned to the reflections of the former owners of this house, who looked sadly at the crystals, realizing that everything they saw, all the events that would unfold in the future, every outcome was unreliable for them, and they could have died. And cracks and gates continued to appear between the two worlds. And over time this process will accelerate and be uncontrollable completely. And unfortunately, they didn't have time to prepare for whatever events might come next with huge monsters coming out of those gates. Unfortunately, they're not going to make it. They realized that they had no choice but to move some of their souls into these dolls, and it was necessary to do so because in their hypothesis there was another parallel world in which salvation could be found for their family. But the situation was so serious and critical that even with the help of the vampire girl, they would barely be able to wall off their house separately from the rest of the space. But it would only be temporary, because then the problems would only get worse. And if their world collapsed, all real estate would be forever suspended between the two worlds. It wasn't until many, many years later, perhaps even millennia later, if someone from another world discovered them, that it could somehow save them. So they wouldn't even be able to live that long, and it would end in an imminent and slow death for the whole family. They'd all be dead except for the vampire girl, because she's different from them. But either way, the hard changes would have affected her as well. So the young man offered to save this girl's life because she had once helped them in that forest, and it was only through her actions that they were able to survive. So they fully accepted her into their family, made her their friend, and they have no choice but to die themselves but save her. And it seems that the girl would never have agreed to the conditions that were required to save her life, so all they could do was ask for her forgiveness and turn her into a doll that they locked in a big huge box on a lock. Unfortunately, their technical abilities were insufficient to understand what would happen to their consciousness afterward when they relocated themselves into these dolls. After a few hundred years, perhaps they will lose themselves completely, and there will be nothing left to remind the world of their earlier presence. And no matter how hard they try to isolate their estate from the outside world, the events that unfold in the future could completely ruin them and everything they own. That's why they decided to save this girl and wait for someone from another world to come and take her with them to their new world. Our hero held a huge pink ball in his right hand, and a new system notification appeared in front of him. The girl fell to her knees, and tears flowed from her eyes in a huge stream. She cried and asked our hero why he hadn't told her earlier. She seemed to understand now how she had actually been imprisoned in that doll figure, and why she had been rescued. Our hero explained to her that because of her nature, she wouldn't be able to do what these people did because she is different. That's why they had to pull this whole operation to save her. Our hero rushed her and told her that she didn't have much time left, so she needed to come to her senses and stop crying. And the cost for the time until her abilities are in effect is enormous. She has less than 3 minutes left, so she needs to hurry. Our hero paid a pretty hefty price for her, so he doesn't want her to just sit on the floor and cry. He explained to her again that all this time they had remained puppets to save her life, so now it was her turn to help her former friends. Still sobbing hard, she yelled loudly that she couldn't do it. Our hero started yelling at her and saying that these people were completely unaware of how things could end, and that she now needed to release their souls to heaven in honor of their repose, and that's the minimum level of commitment required of her at this minute. She seemed to be able to gather her thoughts and got up from the floor, barely able to stand. She looked at the scattered parts of these large dolls that lay on the floor and remembered how good they had been together. After that, a new system notification suddenly appeared, informing our hero that he had finally learned the truth about this girl's true fate. Along with that, huge streams of blue light flew somewhere in the sky. The girl was relieved, but tears continued to stream from her eyes. This dungeon was finished and new rewards were received by our heroes. And we go back to our world, where a large number of rescue teams were already waiting for our heroes. Many of them had no strength and also had multiple wounds, so they needed medical attention. But everyone managed to survive, and that's the most important thing. Even our hero felt that he had spent quite a bit of time there, and that the whole event and operation had dragged on. He lowered his gaze down in the direction of the cat who was walking beside him, and said that in her presence the phrase about time sounded incorrect. He asked her how she felt compared to the past world. She said there was no difference, and she still felt a weak mana level. And in all the hustle and bustle and running of medical teams helping our warriors who had gotten their injuries earlier in the dungeon, she told him that no matter what this new world looked like, her commitment now was to help our hero.